So this is really, really great stuff. AMD has made good on its promises to release a new version of FSR4 for GPUs using the RDNA 3 architecture, a new phase in its rollout for machine learning-based super resolution. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at what this technology enables on lower-end RDNA 3, and it doesn't get much lower-end than Valve's Steam machine, essentially using a pared-back version of the Navi 33 processor found in the RX 7600 and the 7600 XT. Pretty much as soon as FSR4 arrived for Windows discrete GPUs, a Proton Experimental on Steam machine was updated, and for a big bunch of games, the existing FSR3 option was seamlessly replaced with FSR4. Good stuff. So the question is this a game changer for Steam machine? Well, I'd describe it more as a very, very useful tool to have in the box. But more to the point, looking more widely, FSR4 for RX 7000 class GPUs. I think it's a bit of a game changer, and we'll be taking a look at RX 7800 XT and 7900 XTX further on in the video. So let's move on to benchmarks, and equally as crucial, gameplay testing. Okay then, so the Valve console-like mini PC is an interesting use case for FSR4 because of how relatively little horsepower you have available. Compared to existing AMD parts, you're typically about 10 to 11% faster than an RX 6600, which to be clear is not a very fast GPU, while the RX 7600 about 15 to 17% faster than Steam Machine in our tests. However, I'd still contend that in most games, Steam Machine is pretty fine for 1440p gaming. It's all about using optimized settings and console equivalent settings, something we have a lot of experience dealing with. Would it be easier to target 1080p instead? Of course it would, but I'm also of the opinion that Steam Machine is designed for living room displays, and even upscaling from 1440p to TV standard 4K looks a lot better than doing the same with 1080p. And with that in mind, let's start with a tough challenge, Crimson Desert. At native 1440p, our optimized settings only deliver a 28.7 FPS average, rising to a more creditable but still low 38.7 FPS on FSR3 quality mode. That's a 34.7% boost, which is pretty good I'd say, but FSR4 will be lower. There's just a 21.8% improvement to performance with FSR4 quality mode, rising to 30.2% with balance mode. That takes us to a 37.4 FPS average, so we still need more. Swapping out balance mode for performance mode, we're at a 41 FPS average with a 42.8% performance increase over native. I'd say that's pretty good, especially as this sequence is far more demanding than the vast bulk of the game, from a GPU perspective at least, but we can boost frame rates with a different setting selection. In this case, I'm using Pearl Abyss's own selection for the PS5 balance mode. This gives us a circa 8% increase to performance across the board, and our FPS average with FSR4 performance mode now stands at 44.5 FPS. So with FSR3 quality mode, we have a high performance, low quality upscaler. But as you can see here, we're able to claw back the performance with more aggressive upscaling using FSR4, but the nature of the upscaling actually sees FSR4 delivering a palpably better result, even though internal resolution pre-upscaling is significantly lower. We'll take a quick look at how that plays out in other content in our gameplay test section, and we'll also look at frame generation, but I'd describe this as a decent VRR experience. Let's move on to something a little less challenging now, Resident Evil Requiem. We're using our optimized low settings here, but to be clear, these are not quote-unquote low settings as such. We're using our standard optimized settings and making the smallest amount of tweaks possible to ensure smooth gameplay on an 8GB GPU. And even on native resolution 1440p, we're in a pretty good place actually, a 56.7 FPS average at native in this test scene. FSR3 quality mode gives you a 44.7% boost to frame rate, but as we've demonstrated, it's not really a good look. FSR4 quality mode offers a 19.5% increase to frame rate, increasing to 30% with balance mode. And again, if we swap in FSR4 performance mode, frame rate improvement over native is now at 42.5%, up against 44.7% with FSR3 quality mode. Next up, Cyberpunk 2077, native 1440p resolution with the PC equivalent to PlayStation 5's performance mode settings. In effect, what you might call CD Projekt Red's own optimized settings. Base frame rate is good here at 71.8 FPS, but FSR scaling improvements are not impressive. Every game will scale differently depending on the upscaling implementation. A key part of this is that while base resolution is lower, some buffers do need to be rendered out at native output resolution. Anyway, a 33.2% boost for FSR3 quality mode, with the FSR4 equivalent delivering just a 7.8% improvement. That's not good. Balance mode takes that up, but it's still a mere 16% improvement over native, and when we factor in performance mode, our net increase from native rises to 25%. So yeah, remember our native resolution there is actually just 720p. A 25 percentage point boost, not great. But moving on from Steam Machine, I also want to talk about desktop RDNA 3 GPUs with a bit more horsepower and what FSR4 does for them, because I think it's fair to say that the cost of the new upscaler does seem to change relatively to what we're seeing with Steam Machine. Kind of makes sense as the hardware balance shifts and the demands we're putting on the upscaler change. Let's look at the fully maxed out Resident Evil Requiem experience on a 7800 XT with full ray tracing at 1440p. In this example, FSR3 quality mode is only 10% faster than the FSR4 equivalent, while balance mode is about 2.5% faster than FSR3 quality. The boosts are much higher than we saw on Steam Machine, but this is almost certainly down to the fact that ray tracing is in the mix, where reductions in input resolution dramatically improve performance, more so than the rasterization settings we used on Steam Machine. I'd say that the results here with the 7800 XT are really good, especially bearing in mind the image quality improvements we demonstrated earlier. So I showed this benchmark on DF Direct. It's the same test running on RX 7900 XTX, but at 4K instead. And I guess because of the RT effect, the frame rate increases are even more profound. An 80% boost for FSR3 quality mode, 61% boost for FSR4 quality mode, and a remarkable 119% increase in performance mode. As we're running at 4K here, I think performance mode is a better fit for this kind of test than balanced. A 2x upscale at this kind of resolution is absolutely fine. Outstanding results, I'd say, and anything that improves the outlook of ray tracing performance on RDNA 3 to this degree is pretty good in my book. Crimson Desert's use of ray tracing is much less pronounced, however, so the frame rate increases are more in line with what we saw on Steam Machine. Using optimized settings here at 1440p, the 7800 XT is 30% to the better when using FSR3 quality mode, 18% faster with the FSR4 equivalent, 25% to the better with balance mode. Not plotted here, but performance mode takes that up to 36%. What's interesting here is that without heavy use of RT, the gap between FSR3 quality mode and its FSR4 equivalent widens out again. Again, you should expect to see differences in the effectiveness of upscaling and boosting frame rate on a game-by-game basis. We're ramping up to cinematic settings with the RX 7900 XTX at 4K resolution, a 55 percentage point boost for performance mode over native, which is a bit more like it, but still well down on the heavier RT boost we saw from Resi. Here, FSR3 quality mode is only 13% faster than its FSR4 equivalent, but perf mode looks better and runs a touch faster, 66 FPS versus 63 FPS. These numbers were interesting enough for me to want to do some gameplay tests with these GPUs, so let's dig in. Alan Wake 2 4K high settings on the 7900 XTX with low ray tracing. So low ray tracing is still of a higher quality than the ray tracing in the PS5 Pro version of the game and gives you the majority of the impact ray tracing brings to the mix. To stabilize at 60 FPS, I dropped from 2160p to 1800p, with just a few frames dropped in the testing forest scene. The performance is there, the quality is there, the raster settings are arguably overkill, and I'd say this experience is pretty awesome. The price of RT is high, however, as you can see here, running pretty much the same test in the problematic forest area using a 7800 XT. Still 1800p output resolution, still high settings, but RT is disabled. Slightly less solid in terms of a 60 FPS lock, but good enough. Moving back to the RX 7900 XTX, I was quite happy with the experience from Cyberpunk 2077. Using the PS5 performance mode settings, RT reflections and medium RT, which we've pegged as optimized RT. FSR4 performance mode at 1800p, and the experience is rock solid here on the RX 7900 XTX in the Phantom Liberty Dogtown GPU stress test. Speedy traversal through Night City and Dogtown is also rock solid and looks great. Pretty impressive stuff, I'd say. Now, looking at the exact same settings on the RX 7800 XT, but at 1440p resolution this time with FSR4 balance mode, a tweaked nighttime run through our Night City streaming test pleasingly locks to 60 FPS throughout. But we do see drops into the 50s in the black marketplace run. Now, I guess this is fine in the age of VRR, FreeSync, etc. But you can alleviate this using dynamic resolution scaling with a 50 to 100% scaling range. But it has to be said that those flickering artifacts on the lighting can be a touch annoying. Ultimately though, I really hope I've demonstrated here that FSR4 can be transformative for RDNA 3 cards across the entire spectrum. And that leads us to wrap-up time then. FSR4 works on RDNA 3 and it works very, very well. And while it's taken perhaps too long for AMD to get its act together and properly release something, well, let's just get down to basics. The INT8 super resolution technology is a valuable option for any RDNA 3 device. The FSR4 performance here is clearly significantly higher than using FSR3 when you're comparing like-for-like settings. But in most cases, performance mode looks better than quality mode, which makes up a lot of the performance difference, and sometimes it's even faster. On higher-end RDNA 3 cards, the gains are much more pronounced with heavy ray tracing, bringing that feature into contention where once you may have been put off by the impact to image quality with FSR3. Honestly, it's been a pleasure going back to the 7900 XTX and the 7800 XT. These older products feel properly refreshed thanks to FSR4. The only criticism at this point really is how FSR4 adoption itself is still off pace compared to DLSS. It shouldn't be down to Optiscaler to step in to make things happen. But well, I guess at least Optiscaler does exist. But let's be clear here, getting it working, especially under Linux on Steam Machine, especially with Unreal Engine 5 games, it can be a pain. I'd like to see more from AMD in working with developers to get FSR4 into the latest games. And of course, developers themselves should be supporting great features like this. It's inexcusable not to be supporting FSR4 if there is a DLSS implementation. But I suspect it's down to users like you and journalists like us to keep up the pressure and to make the case that vendor-specific support like this, limited to just one vendor, is not acceptable. Okay, so that's it for now. Thanks to Oliver for helping out with the image quality comparisons so we could do something comprehensive while cutting down delivery time on this video. But yeah, usual stuff at this point about liking, subscribing, sharing and bell ringing, etc. But more seriously, the DF supporter program, YouTube ad revenues still suck hard, so support helps to enable content like this and initiatives like the DF Retro Super Show. Early access opportunities, ad-free video downloads, ad-free website, brilliant community. I'm super proud of everything we're delivering with the DF supporter program. But that's all from me on this one. Thanks as ever for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.